Gnomes are real, but they're not nice and cute little garden dwellers. They don't wear colorful clothes or fend off invasive pests or plant things beneficial to your lawn. No, gnomes are awful, devilish little terrors with a penchant to cruelty. I'd know. I had to get rid of a gnome infestation, and it nearly cost me my life. I decided to do some late summer yard work for my neighborhood to make a little cash when I returned to school. Now, there were a few elderly couples throughout the subdivision, and even the proudest of them have always accepted my help when offered. During winter, I'd shovel driveways. In the fall, I'd rake leaves, and in the summer, I'd help out in the gardens. I'd mow lawns, repairing fences. I always felt nice, to help my community. And usually, it paid fairly well. One of the couples, a family whose real name I'll replace with Connors, have always firmly declined my offers. I've generally suspected the reasoning behind that was that they liked their privacy. I'd never seen them attend any of the neighborhood gatherings. They generally kept to themselves within town as well. It never bothered me. I'd always been a little relieved upon being turned down, considering the enormity of their yard. Their property spanned several acres, and with only a standard push mower to use, I'd be out in the shadeless heat all day. But this summer, upon passing through the front gate of the property to make an obligatory morning offer, Mrs. Connor came out of the house to greet me, as if she'd been expecting me. I waved, and she gestured for me to come onto the porch. She had 2 glasses in her hand, and handed me one as she took a seat on one of the chairs. I thanked her and seated myself beside her, and before I could even take a sip of the apparently freshly squeezed lemonade, she went right into her request. She explained how she and her husband had been dealing with an infestation of sorts, one that had cost them not only their garden, but their sleep and general peace of mind as well. Initially, I only half listened, since upon hearing the word infestation, I immediately planned on saying no. I'm not an exterminator, and while I'm not terrified of bugs, I generally don't like dealing with them in large quantities. But when she mentioned how she wanted to keep the problem a secret, and was willing to pay quite a sum to that effect, I honed in, and paid her words a little more attention. She said they didn't have any deterrents specific to their particular kind of infestation, but that I was free to use whatever means necessary to get rid of the nasty vermin. I thought it odd that they wouldn't have anything in the way of pesticides, considering the scale of their land and how they had at one point farmed it, and considering their past aversion to my presence in a garden they presumably cherished quite a bit. But I kept quiet, my interests and willingness to help already secured by the mention of a large payment. I've mentioned that they used to farm, but eventually made enough money to simply let the land go uncultivated as they settled into the golden years. She ended our conversation by saying that I should get started immediately, then motioned for me to return my glass, from which I hadn't taken a single sip. I quickly took a few swigs and then handed it back to her, and only soured my face after she was gone. The lemonade was entirely unsweetened. And yet, she drained her own glass as if perfectly accustomed to such bitterness. At her word, a shout from within the house, which I was not invited into, I went around back towards the massive shed just before the lawn. There I found Mr. Connors bent over a work table, his back to me. There were unlabeled cans piled atop the table, many of them open, fumes emanating visibly from several. The collective smell was quite pungent, more than a little offensive to my nostrils. Without venturing too far in, I introduced myself and related Miss Connors' instructions. Mr. Connors, with his back still to me, raised a hand as if to say, "All right," then promptly went back to his business. Figuring that I'd be left to my own devices, I turned to leave. But a sort of grunt from the old man stopped me, and a few moments later he turned around, bearing a glass container in his hand, one that resembled some kind of alchemist's decanter. "Take this in here. When you find the little bastards, douse them. No need to ignite it, the stuff will burn fire on its own. It'll burn clean, too. The yard won't be tarnished." Then he shoved the container in my hand and strode past me out of the shed. I scanned the work table's surface, but nothing there was identifiable, as if Old Man Connors had purposely stripped every single label from the various cans, flasks, and bottles. Assuming that the concoction I held was volatile in one way or another, I set it down carefully and retrieved my gloves from my back pocket. I didn't have goggles, and my lack of seasonal allergies made the use of a mask wholly unnecessary for most jobs. So my 4-year-old gloves from a warehouse job I'd had were the only things available to me in the way of PPE. Heading back outside, I figured that I'd find the hive or the nest or the hovel or whatever I dumped the dubious concoction therein, and then wait a little while to see if anything swarmed out. Lawnmower at the ready. They hadn't asked me to cut the lawn, but I figured that without proper extermination tools, the rapid spinning blades of a lawnmower would be as efficient as anything else, for cutting down stragglers. Retrieving my lawnmower from my truck, I went into the yard and canvassed the foremost portion until I found an area of disturbed land, about 50 feet from the house. The grass around this area was flattened, as if it had been consistently trampled, and in some places it was even blackened as if burned or rotted. At the center of this disturbance was a hole, about the size of a dinner plate, and immeasurably deep. Peering within, I saw only blackness, and I heard nothing but a faint, uncanny tittering. Figuring that this was at least one emergence point of the yet-to-be-named vermin, I quickly poured a little bit of the mystery liquid into the hole. It stood back. I expected maybe a little frothing in the ground, perhaps a small surge or a billow of fumes. I didn't expect steam to spew out of the hole, nor did I expect to hear high-pitched shrieking, as if I had poured acid into a bag of cats. A column of greenish vapor rose from the hole, and the shrill, multifaceted scream echoed out into the open sky. More than a little unnerved, I'd never heard any bug or rodent make such an awful sound. I backed several feet away, momentarily forgetting that I'd brought the lawnmower. A few seconds later, a tiny figure weakly emerged from the hole, fumes rising from its back like a fluttering cape of smoke. Throughout the vaporous haze around it, I saw a diminutive, vaguely humanoid figure, albeit apparently lacking a head. The body teetered on the open ground as if drunk or disoriented, and then fell over, still smoking. The screams within the hole grew weaker, and then eventually faded away, even as the smoke and fumes dissipated. Stunned, I cautiously approached the hole and peered in. A smell still lingered, one of burnt earth, and decay, and something else. Something noxious and indescribable. Old beyond measure, but there weren't any other figures that I could see, so I turned my attention to the one that had managed to escape the hole. As I mentioned, its body was that of a small person, about the size of a child's doll, though it wore no clothing whatsoever. Skin was a brownish orange, like a rotting carrot, and appeared thick and rough. Though I wasn't sure if these attributes were its natural color and texture, or the result of the acrid substance I had doused it with. Its aforementioned lack of a head wasn't completely true. There was a head, only it was situated within its chest, jutting a little outwards from between its pecs. The head, or rather the embossed face, had two small, whiteless eyes, both of which were open, staring fixedly, lifelessly skyward, reflecting none of the morning sunlight. The rest of its face was almost unmentionably ugly. Its features warped and exaggerated in some aspects and shrunken or misshapen in others. It elicited an immediate feeling of repulsion in me, which managed to stifle somewhat of the pity that I had felt earlier upon hearing its tortured screams. Still, clearly this was a being of some intelligence and relation, however distant to humanity, and I felt that I needed an immediate explanation from the homeowners. Leaving the little creature's body there, I trudged back to the home and knocked on the door, still bearing the toxic substance. Mr. Connor answered and grimaced at seeing the liquid, as if disappointed I hadn't used it all. I told him exactly what had happened. He listened as if already familiar with the strangely human pests. His relaxed response to my incredulity annoyed me, so I demanded answers. And he replied by saying that they were prepared to pay me a small fortune to flush out the whole of them. By way of convincing, he withdrew into the home and returned a moment later with a lockbox, which he opened to reveal several neat stacks of cash, dozens of hundreds banded together. Any ethical issues I had were summarily forgotten upon seeing the money. The old man smiled and turned back to his house, but as I was about to head back into the yard, he called out again, saying, "Beware of them. They may look a little like us, but they ain't. And theirs is a fell and ancient kind. If foul magic's taken root in here, and there be horrors buried below." And with that, he shut the door. Sufficiently warned, I trekked back to the yard, towards the spot where I had encountered the first emergence hole. The little creature that had crawled out was now a little more than a loose pile of remains. It had decomposed in a short span of time as I'd been gone. There were no bones amongst the pile, only its darkened and crumbled flesh, which looked weirdly like the soil beneath it. Disgusted, and admittedly a little frightened by the inhumanity of it, I left the hole and I ventured farther out into the yard to find another. A short way away, perhaps half an acre from the lawn's initial edge, I found a small pile of gray stones, like a cairn. Only there were strange roots intertwined throughout the structure, as if something had been planted immediately beneath or within the pile of stones. And while I'm no geologist, I felt that the stones weren't native to the land. They were oddly smoothed, as if rendered that way by eons of rushing water, almost gem-like in their surfaces. The weed-like roots around them were pitch black, darker than anything else in the yard. Something about the structure was incredibly ominous. It made me feel as if I had encountered some small piece of a much larger and darker image. Shaken, but still determined to complete the job, I gave the thing a wide berth and continued on, but stopped a few paces away, seeing something off in the distance. Standing atop another one of the root-enmeshed cairns was one of the diminutive creatures. Only this one was very much alive, and its black, beady, chest-embedded eyes were glaring at me with open and profound hatred. Rendered speechless by the sight of it and the sheer malignance of its gaze, I stood there, unsure of what to do. For a few more moments, it quietly projected its seemingly baseless antipathy, then hopped down from the cairn, landing somewhere behind it. I waited, giving my pounding heart time to return to a somewhat normal pace, and then I proceeded on. A container of acid held out before me. Reaching the cairn, I cautiously peered behind it and found another hole. This one considerably smaller than the last, just big enough for the burrowing of a single creature. The apparent depth, however, was comparable to the last one. There was only darkness therein, though this hole lacked the far-down tittering sound that I'd heard from the former. Unsealing the lid of the container, I went to tilt the mouth towards the hole, but a voice, high-pitched and harshly intoned, spoke from the in-depths. "Iana, man, Iana, you not." The vehemence behind the voice made me freeze, and the subsequent silence, deathly intense, made me reapply the cap and step away from the hole. I hadn't expected the things to be capable of communication, let alone real sentences. And hearing this vicious speech unsettled me more than anything that I'd ever heard. I decided to abandon this particular hole to find another, and hope that I could, through some subterranean connection, eliminate that particularly menacing entity by flooding the hovel of another. Thoroughly frightened, but still financially desperate enough to not flee, I continued my search. No amount of money would have been enough to convince me to help the Connors, had I known the full scope of nightmares housed within the depths of their land. Hey guys, I just want to make sure that all of you take a look in the description down below for multiple different reasons. The main reason I'm talking about right now, though, is to look at the author's links. Every time that I do a story on one of these platforms, I post links from the authors. Some of them are books that the authors put out. If you like the stories that you hear, then I highly, highly encourage you to go scroll down, take a look in the description, click one of those links. If you like that author, I guarantee you they have something else that you're going to like. And if they have a book out there, you're going to love that book. I mean, hell, that's how Tales from the Gas Station became what it is, okay? If you guys heard it on YouTube, then hey, there are more, bigger, better versions of it out there that you can get on Amazon or Audible or No Sleep or what have you. So for reals, scroll down, check out the links. And that's not like an advertisement thing. I'm just like, look, this is for your benefit. Check it out. And as always, I want to give a very big thank you to everybody who supports me on Patreon. Thank you so much. A very big thank you to Jordan Alexander Sanchez, Stephanie Butler, Reaper61167, Bobby Karman, Tristain, Pelton, Chance Burnett, Diana Kraus, Thiccy McQuicky, SamaHigh, CrusaderChocobo, SpookyShel, Atomaurus, Grand Moth the Milky, Big Smoke 369, Captain Scurvy, SaltyIrishPoet, Estebean, Brayden Morris, Nate Kuhl, HorrorFan1212, Hour Minute Second Time, Kyle Reznak, David Martin, Scare-ington the Unkempt, Robert Malcolm, Angelus, Spanky, Snoochie Boochie, Seclude, Lupita Galvin, That Creepy Chick, Tyler Fletcher, Merxenum, Red Shadow Cat, Xavier the Cheyenne, Demix, Sean Cadieu-baker, 6 Gay Rats in a Trenchcoat, Turtleman, Rob Like Sharp Things, Cryolinian, Xavier Graphius, Lord Life's Best, Goring Tramagasi, Maria Walker, Emily Mitchell, Crazy Kid, Mr. Marcus Blitz, Eka Limchok, Dirt Diver Trio, Matt Bach, Voice of Sand, Coffee Zombie, Hidden Tiger, Shelly J, Jeremy H, Psychomel, Nana, Deleted Account, Melted Lake, Tali Sue, William King, Darth Miver, Michael Ortiz, Satanic Aries, BardoHawk764, Lambda M98, Harley, Sashi Suzaku, Cronut509, Kaylee Ambrose, Suji Campbell, Stricken, Freddy Krueger, Happy Birthday Jason Wilson, Lisa Cottrell, Caspian, Hades Nephew, Tater Chip, Acid System, Prozac and Pancake Appreciation Society, Benjamin Welvret, Cryptic Nightmares, Kiwi the Sloth, Fester's Lampshade, Sky Harbor, Nico Kyle, Rafael Rodriguez, The Ginger Bros, Aaron Stormcrow, Daniel Polson, and Corey Kenshin. As always, thank you guys so much, because you guys help me do everything that I do here. You guys help pay authors for stories and commission stories and do everything that I can do to make this channel and make this podcast the best it could possibly be. So thank you all for supporting me here. And as always, everyone, sweet dreams.